Welcome to the Birchal podcast. I am delighted to welcome Andrew Ellett from HelpPay and John Bertrand AO, also from HelpPay. Andrew's the co-founder and MD of HelpPay, a social fintech based in Melbourne, designed to make bill sharing and payments easier by allowing users to securely share bills with family and friends. A long career in technology and also a Birchal customer. So thank you very much for coming on the podcast.
Thanks, Matt. A joy to be here.
And I am also delighted to welcome John Bertrand AO, a social impact advisor to HelpPay, renowned Australian yachtsman and businessman, and best known for his role as skipper of Australia 2, which won the America's Cup in 1983. Perhaps the greatest Australian sporting victory ever, ending the New York Yacht Club's 132-year winning streak. Also represented Australia at the Olympic Games twice, and a range of other achievements that we don't really have the time in this podcast to cover all of them, but extending through business and philanthropy. A great honour to welcome you on the podcast as well. Thank you, John.
My pleasure, Matt.
Before we hop into the conversation, I'm really interested to know how you two came together and what has kind of united you in what you're setting out to achieve at HelpPay.
Well, our introduction was via who?
We'll have to give a shout out to Ned Coton from Engage RM. But I'll just probably say this. I've always been a big believer in networking is the willingness to give without expecting anything back in return. And a colleague of mine, Ned, invited me for a walk in the park, a walk around the Tan. He said, I'm doing a lap of the Tan with John Bertrand. Would you like to come? And you don't have to ask me twice. I love my sport. I love business discussions. I love walking the Tan. So I went along, and John and I just had a chat. And then for some reason, Ned invited us back, or John invited me back. We swapped numbers, and it was never with any intention to probably get to where we've got to today, which is sitting on a Birchal podcast. But maybe I'll let John take over from there as to what happened after our first two laps.
Yeah, well, actually, quite a few laps, as it turns out. Yeah, look, I'm a curious person, and I've been involved in startups in the past. And I was co-founder of a company which we launched on NASDAQ in America out of Silicon Valley in the late 90s. So
wow.
I've done a lot of stuff. That was a joint venture with NBC in America.
Amazing.
It was a sports broadcast company over the internet, so it was a big deal at the time. Just normal scenarios of ups and downs is normal. I've won a few races, sailing races, and lost a lot, typical of this stuff. So I was really interested in Andrew's story of where he was going with his associates, in particular with HelpPay. And I'm always interested in really interesting people and good people. So one thing led to another, and Andrew and his board asked me to perhaps get involved in to help out, steer the ship a little bit, and through my world of hard knocks in the past, help out a little bit more. But the most important thing from my perspective is really spending time with really interesting and good people. I'm old enough and wise enough that I don't have to hang out with any dickheads. And that's really important, So anyway, so one thing led to another, and I have a small involvement with HelpPay, and hence sitting here with this little podcast you've got, well, big podcast, you should say little.
It's going to be big now, John.
Yeah, and shooting the breeze in terms of life's lessons.
Fantastic. Yep. Andrew, maybe if you can take me through HelpPay, what inspired you to create it? What's the problem that you're solving and how you're solving it?
Fundamentally, we exist to make helping easier. That's our purpose. We were born out of COVID when myself and my fellow co-founders were sitting around talking about friends who had lost jobs, particularly in hospitality. I'm talking March the 13th, 2020. That was the day we call HelpPay Day. That was when we were allowed 2 people in your house. I had my friend, my co-founder in the house with me, and we were just talking about if we want to go and give help to somebody without just giving them money, but we just want to keep the lights on, with how do we do that? You can't ring up an energy provider or a water retailer and say, I want to pay somebody else's bill for them. So we workshopped this idea. We went into market research. We did this properly. I've been fortunate enough to be the founder of a number of different companies over my career, mainly in technology, as you said in the intro, but also co-founded, along with the main founder, an energy retailer once. And some of these enterprises were more successful than others. Some I exited, some I'm still in. But we realised it's not enough just to have the idea. You have to go and work out your product market fit. And so we spent basically a year in market research and product design, talking to hundreds of execs, getting the support of some really serious business leaders, mothballing the idea, making sure we had a going concern. And we then did a soft launch of our product on last day of November 2021. We soft launched to market. And effectively, we've got a world first technology stack that turns every bill in Australia into its own shareable payment page. But probably important today, let's not talk about product features and what it is. Just I'll try to stay focused on the ethos of the business. But fundamentally, it is about helping people who might be having a blip, an accident, lose a job, going through COVID, as we all did, and just needs a bit of a helping hand making ends meet. So our primary use case is genuinely about social impact. This is a for-purpose business. And I guess we were fortunate that we had initially we bootstrapped this business and we could literally turn all the resources we had and some of our other businesses to build out this tech stack. This wasn't and isn't about making money. Now, sure, we are a for-profit social impact business. One day down the track, we hope to return, capital to our shareholders, and we did a capital raise on the Birchal platform, which is how we met yourself, and that was a really pivotal step in our journey as well, to get genuinely invested people in what we stand for actually on our share registry. And that's one of the great reasons for us to do a crowdsourced fundraise, was not just to raise the money, which we needed to keep the lights on, because these are expensive platforms to build, payment technology platforms, bill sharing platforms, first of their kind. And so to attract people who were interested in what we do and believed in our vision and have people who would also talk about us. And that's from all the research and reading I've done, not just firsthand for HelpPay, but one of the reasons to do a crowdsourced funding campaign is to get genuinely invested people who will talk about your product or your service and involved on the journey. So, it's been amazing. I often say it's been the hardest and the most rewarding thing I've ever done, to set up a business that is fundamentally to help other people, but with it has to be able to stand on its own 2 feet one day so that we can make the most impact.
And is that what captured your imagination, in addition to the person, was that at its core, this business is about kind of leveraging people to help people, making it easier to help?
Well, I guess from my perspective, I was chairman of the Alana Madeline Foundation for 15 years, and that came out of the Port Arthur massacre. 36 people were murdered, and Walter Mikak was the original founder of that, and his wife and 2 little girls were killed. Look, when I got involved with the Alana Madeline, Raz and I just came back from London with our business interests. The place was broke. It was a stand-up office only. Anyway, so we built it into a very significant foundation where we've helped over 1 million. When I'd left, we'd helped over 1 million children in terms of anti-bullying online. It's a big deal. So I've been involved in the philanthropic space. I am in a situation where my profile and my sort of can-do attitude, I can help a lot, actually, as it turns out. So this space was not unfamiliar to me. So when Andrew and his in particular Andrew came along and started to talk about this was kind of pretty intriguing. That's life is tough for a lot of people in this country, as is around the world. And this is a very unique, compelling platform using social media, but it's a technology platform. The interesting thing, from my perspective, is that Andrew and his colleagues, co-directors, have very much come from a technology space, and a successful technology space in terms of software development. And this was a race about getting product into the marketplace on time, on budget, as much as one can, with all the vagrancies of a startup operation, for the good. And that's a big statement, for the good. Doesn't often happen. And it becomes clear, the energy bills is a big deal. People have a hard time meeting their energy bills with the cost of living going through the roof, and the ability just for friends, families, and associates to help out. Not only energy bills, but schooling. The kids. How do you keep the kids in school when any money going into this is all after tax? Funding. All of these stories, there's a lot of stuff out there, and so it's a pretty interesting project that they had going with Help Pay. So all of those things, and the quality of the people involved. Again, I'm not in the business of hanging out with dickheads anymore. So all of those things made it pretty interesting to help out as much as I could along the road.
You say anymore, I'm going to come back and ask you maybe the ones that you used to hang out with that you're maybe glad that you're not. It's not wanting to it is hard. It's been hard. It's really interesting that you refer to Help Pay Day, that day of the lockdowns. We're all from Melbourne, and I think it's interesting that your connection happened around the tan, which really kind of became the centre of universe for so many people in Melbourne during that time. It's been really hard for startups, not just for everyone, but in particular for startups over the last few years. And I've probably had a similar experience to you. Our business started a couple of years before COVID, but we had to get through that. And we're talking about cost of living pressures now, and likelihood of another interest rate rise, and the need for Help Pay has never been greater. How do you keep going in situations like that when the blows keep coming, and you're not really sure if you're on the right track, particularly as a regulated business as well? Just keen for your thoughts, and I suppose keen for some of the advice and guidance that John's been giving you.
For me, it's what keeps us going is the people around. I knew I didn't want to do another startup without co-founders. I've done the solo co-founder thing before, and for me, it was like, no, having that tribe around you, and particularly when we're building a platform with a vision that uses people's tribes. So I genuinely believe my co-founders, people like John, our chairman, they're the core inner group that keeps us when the going gets tough. We can pick each other up, we can motivate each other, we can give each other a bit of a support. I've had many hugs with with the other co-founders, and also just an attitude of every no that you get is an opportunity to ask somebody else. And as you know, Matt, when you start a new business in a regulated environment like Birchal is too, you have to push the boundaries and have a mindset of, I'm going to keep pushing forward. And I think that's probably a fairly common answer for most startup founders. The other thing I'd just like to add to that though as well is we've always had an attitude, and I remember doing a presentation to our wider group because we've got a big tech arm to our business, the technologists who build our platform, and it is, we can't believe our own shit doesn't smell. And what I mean by that is, and I don't mind using that word on camera because that's the truth of it. That's how we said it to a group of 30 people. Keep looking at our business model. Keep looking at our tech stack. Don't believe it's always right just because it's our idea. We have to keep really looking ourselves in the eye and saying, is this working? Is this right? And we have had to completely change how we price our platform. How we thought we'd make money isn't how we ended up, how we're trying to make money. So just that really honest looking yourself in the eye and not just believing, oh, we are right. And I think it takes a lot to be able to look at yourself and go, oh, I've made mistakes. And I see it's interesting joining, the startup and the VC community, sort of mid-career, because I see a lot of people start with great ideas and all the belief in the world, but either without the skill set, they believe they can deliver on their idea, but actually they're not working hard or they don't have the actual skill set. And I think it's really important to be honest with yourself. If you lose the drive, then put somebody else in who's got it. So we're just very real about the challenges we've got and knowing when we've made mistakes. And of course, part of being in a startup is making mistakes. Geez, I wish I could have my time again and not have gone down some directions, but that you got to be able to have the wherewithal to say, okay, that wasn't right. Quickly stop. Let's change again. And that very fluid ability to be responsive to what the market's saying and change.
Yeah. So look, in terms of change, I often think that, with any of these new business models, particularly, this whole internet explosion is just a start of a journey, I think. Well, clearly it is. One has to be in the business of happy to be reinventing oneself every month, if required. As when you understand the market with all this dynamics and all this unknowns, it's just a reality. So, the Americans, I think, I've got great admiration for the US. I did a Master of Science at MIT in Boston a long time ago, and having lived in the US for quite a long time with, 5 America's Cups, as it turns out, challenges and defence, and also Olympic Games and so on. The Yanks are in the business of failing fast, learn, succeed. Failing fast, learn, succeed. And when we're putting our company together with a company called Quokka Sports in the late 90s, long time ago, sports broadcast company over the internet,
in the late 90s.
Yeah.
Ahead of your time.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. We thought we were 18 months ahead of our time. As it turns out, we're 20 years ahead of our time.
Yeah.
So in partnership with NBC in America. So we're their digital arm. We broadcast the 2000 Olympics, NBCOlympics.com. It was the biggest website in the world at the time.
Wow.
We had 350 people in Homebush broadcasting. A year later, we figured we could do it with 35 people. That's how fast the technology was changing.
Wow.
So we're cut and pasting, literally, where we were in the year 2000 during the Olympics. And a year later, from 350, we figured we could do it with 35. Anyway, that's the world we're in. But the Americans are very fast on their feet. They fail. Our venture capitalists who are on our board, they were adamant that whoever we hired, some of them had to have gone broke because they're the ones who've seen the red flags, not the good times. And generally, the average in the US and the Silicon Valley and Texas and so on is generally people have had to have gone broke 2 or 3 times before they've been successful. Very rarely are they successful first time around. Why? They lack the experience to knowing the T sections of life. Do you go left or do you go right? At key decisions. Do you pull your head in or do you go for it? And, that's an experience-based thing. So the Americans, they're very, very good with the whole startup space. The Silicon Valley is still the powerhouse of the American economy, in terms of technology-driven US economy. And, there's a lot of knowledge there. They're not, they're intelligent people. I have great respect for them, but it's not because they're super intelligent. It's just because it's a big marketplace and they can specialize. But the point is that, this business of failing fast, learn, succeed is really powerful. It's something that we struggle with in this country, and certainly in Europe, there's a bigger struggle. Like if you go broke in Australia, it's maybe not the end of your career. In the US, it's seen as a part of life, and in Europe, it could be the end of your career because it's just not acceptable. Things are changing, of course, but the reality is that this whole business of getting on with it, making stuff happen, is extremely powerful within the US psyche. And people move around in America. They move because of their jobs. When we're in San Francisco for 4 years, then Raz and I went to Europe to set up Quokka Sports for Europe, which is part of the IOC. We had an Olympic contract and we did a whole bunch of stuff. We were involved with the Moto Grand Prix, the Le Mans 24-hour. We covered all of that, had the rights for all of that. And so we did a lot of stuff, climbing Mount Everest, taking stuff up the top and down, all of those things. But the Yanks are pretty, they're not afraid to give it a go. That's the power of the US. You don't back against the Americans. We can learn a lot from that in this country.
Yes. That entrepreneurial spirit is something that I think we've had a pretty difficult or strained relationship with
we
in Australia. Yeah.
And it's a lucky country. We can dig stuff out of the ground and send it to China, iron ore, and we're good at farming and pretty good at fishing. But by golly, doing new stuff from scratch is relatively new. The whole venture capital industry is still very, very immature. And it has to be generalist because our market depth is not strong. In the US, you come across the venture capitalists who specialize in a certain widget or gadget. They know it inside out. They're world best. They understand when something may have a good chance of succeeding or not. In Australia, you've got to, it's pretty hard to be a VC and with high success rate. But that's all part and parcel of, who we are. Regardless, that doesn't stop us. And, the industry's becoming much more mature in terms of knowledge base, not mature in terms of, development. And, I think we're getting better and better at it. But as you're right, Matt, it's tough at the moment, where people are pulling their heads in, and the ability to, to get further funding around the place is more difficult than ever. And we become more conservative when times get tough. Because, it's just who we are, lack of risk profile relative. Again, I look at the US and also Israel, Tel Aviv and so on. Very, very good getting, as we say, getting shit done. It's a biggie.
What about the decision to pull your head in, as you say, or keep going and taking the risk? Because it's easy to say to keep going and thinking about inspiring stories of when things have panned out. Those moments when you're at that T intersection and, you play for safety or pull your head in or go for it and take the position. I imagine many companies and founders that will be watching this may be in similar situations at the moment. So what's your advice in those scenarios?
Yeah. I guess from my own experience, it's reaching out to really, really good people to get advice. They can't make the decision for you, but regardless of that, it's really, getting out of your own bubble, if, one would assume that's the case. And, it's pretty lonely. As Andrew's saying, it was important for him to have a co-founder with him, or co-founders plural, to, have people around him in a little tribe, a mini tribe. But putting all that aside, reaching out to some very, very good people to get their advice. However, it still gets back to someone's eventually got to make it happen. And then, the stories of not being able to pay, the wages the next week, do we keep, do we not? One of the great stories is Ted Turner, CNN. And, Ted was involved with the America's Cup, so I knew Ted to some degree. And, they couldn't meet wages. The Middle East war came along. It saved them because they had something to broadcast. There was a point of difference compared to the, NBC and CBS and so on in America a long time ago. And it's a remarkable, but the ability never to give up. Did Ted seek advice? I don't know. So that's the counter to this. But regardless of that, if you ask my advice here, it's really, getting to know and not being, the so-called mentoring and having support, very, very important, just to get a balance of, what would you do? You don't want to blow your marriage up. You don't want to blow all your wealth away. And people get to that stage, and I get that, this kind of, this, and it's hard because working 7x24, it's pretty, it's a tough environment. I get all that. But, there's life after, and the question is, how much do you keep your powder dry relative to just, giving it everything? It's a balance. So there's no, from my perspective, but it's hanging out with very, very good people. I think that's probably the best advice I can give.
It's one of the beautiful things about having an advisor like John on board. Like, John wasn't a co-founder in the business, but to be able to go ring up John anytime and say, time for a lap of the tan, where most of our meetings seem to take place, not always, but probably 90% of them, and just to be able to bounce past, okay, this is where we're at, literally just say, these are the decisions we're making, sense check them. And John just said the word balance. I think in this startup, scale-up world, you do have to find that right balance between spending all your runway versus time in the market, sometimes waiting for the market to catch up with what you've got. And yeah, it's very comforting to know sometimes when we were making tough decisions, and still do, every day, I'm sure you do at Birchal as well, it's like, it's very easy to spend all your money, scale quickly, hire more people, blow it on advertising or spend it on advertising. And that's often, hyper growth is often where a startup falls over. And of course, we're constantly making those tough decisions, looking ourselves in the eye. Is it right to go fast and hard now? Or, and I don't mind saying at the moment, in this market, just know we need to pull back a little bit. Time in the market is most important. Inertia is catching up with, I guess, the platform that we've got. And if I could just come back to cost of living that was talked about and the American way of doing business, there's no doubt the Australian economy is entering a tough phase. I was at I think you have to be living under a rock to not see the pullbacks that are happening in corporate Australia. I was at a lunch with 25 mid to large corporates last week, and I asked the question, who's had a really tough end of the financial year the last 6 months compared to the first 6 months of the financial year that's just finished, so FY24? 80% of the room put their hand up, like they've fallen off a cliff. Interest rates, obviously with inflation, the way it just came out, is probably going to go up. We see on our platform the data of people who are uploading bills and sharing them and saying, we're struggling. And on our platform is every major bank, telco, insurance company, water company, most councils in Australia. We have seen the data increasing steadily throughout this calendar year. And it's kind of, it's a duality to see it, because one side of us is, geez, people are hurting, and the other side is, our platform is getting traction, which is kind of nice, but also it's not a nice feeling to see that people are genuinely hurting out there. And it's all areas. It's from big business down.
It's really interesting. Like, you'd like your platform not to be needed. I mean, it's really interesting,
isn't it?
Thing.
You
Yeah.
talk about a barometer, a litmus test. That's what that's what Help Pay is all about.
Yeah.
Sees the tough end of town,
And
real
then,
end of town.
And then I guess the fortunate side of this is, and there is a good news story in this, is we have released technology and a platform that allows corporate Australia, the big businesses in Australia that are surviving well. You think banks, telcos, insurance, they're all making money. You said it too, John, miners, fishing, they're not so much customers and users of ours because we need consumers at the end to be on our platform. But big business and what John said are propping this economy up a lot. And innovative startups, hospitality, mum and dad businesses are genuinely doing it tough. All the stats show that companies going into receivership on the increase. 1 in 13 hospitality businesses is said to be going out of business in the next 12 months. All sorts of stats coming out like this. And I'm an optimist. I believe that we can turn this around. And this is also the cyclical nature of the economy in the world we live in. However, the beauty of what we have offered at HelpPay is we can go to these corporates, all these banks, insurance, telcos that are on our platform because their customers want to use us, and say, you can do something better and something different for your customers. Simply talk about HelpPay. Put us in as an option. We're another tool in your arsenal to allow your customers to share, get help, and all with the beauty of instantly the money paid on our platform goes directly to that provider, fully reconciled, doesn't go to anybody else. It's not like GoFundMe where you set up campaigns and you don't know where the money's really going. So that social impact side and that tool that we're giving companies is actually something new that's never been done. But going back to something John said is about risk. We are inherently, as opposed to the Americans, less likely to take risk in this country. And I see that in corporates and in just the general startup community. I think this is why most of the biggest tech companies that have ever existed, well, they all come out of America, and so many smaller ones as well. The frustrating thing is probably running a platform like HelpPay is how difficult it is to get these corporates to actually sign up and take a risk and do something new and do something innovative. And my experience working with the C-suites across all these large Australian organisations, and this is another reason why it's great to have someone like John on board, because we could already virtually walk into any boardroom in Australia just off the back of our data and what we stand for. Beautiful thing about having John as an advisor as well is he can just ring up the CEO of a lot of organisations because he knows them personally, and that's just a little thank you and shout out to John for some of the things he's done for us, and talk about having the right people around you just to help make that that last connection into an organisation. What we've noticed about corporate Australia is the C-suites are all on board with a social impact platform like HelpPay. They get it, they like it, they see it. However, C-suites now, so I'm talking CEOs, CFOs, CIOs, CMOs, that sort of, at the top of the tree of a corporate, are generally afraid now to go and say, right, we're going to do this because I say so. You've got to go and bring the mid-tier and senior management along as well.
Yep.
And that's where we've found at HelpPay discussions fall over. I am very disenamored with middle-level management in Australia. They're generally risk-averse. With the job market the way it is, they don't want to take risks. And we see a lot of people pushing paper and prevaricating and not actually going that last mile to make a difference and implement us and our platform, despite the fact that there is somebody, a leader in the organisation, saying we should do this, but you've got to bring everyone else along for a ride. So I just wanted to comment that that's some of the challenges that we see. And talking to other startups, and not just social impact ones, they often have this same challenge.
Yeah.
And I think corporate Australia needs to really, I guess, take a good hard look at itself as to how can we get more innovation going. There's a lot of talk about innovation, but who's truly doing it? And then you also have challenges of regulators coming along and also perhaps imposing some rules as well.
Yeah, so you've encountered some headwinds on that front recently as well, but I'm keen to understand or confirm that HelpPay, as I understand it, is additive. That the goal is to prevent people to end up in hardship, and but I understand that there's some confusion about how companies manage their hardship obligations.
Yeah, I might just address the confusion comment first. no business in the world that we've seen, and our patent attorneys, in America and Australia confirm this, do exactly what HelpPay has done.
Wow, amazing.
Yes, which also though is a challenge, and we call it the blue ocean.
Yeah.
We have to go and educate the entire market about what we do, what we stand for. It's a new paradigm, a new way of looking at how to get money in the door from tribes of people who would support somebody who's going through some tough times. What's happened recently to address the question about regulation is the Australian Energy Regulator, so a body that does a very good job at regulating the energy industry and making sure energy retailers do the right thing, just has written to every energy retailer in the company, and this is just one small industry set that we happen to offer HelpPay to. Think of any bill in Australia, every industry use HelpPay. There's over 60,000 BPay billers. We've got a partnership with BPay, so we've got a huge market. Energy seems to have attached to us well because what's the one bill that people struggle with and every household in Australia has? Energy. So it's a sort of common sense fit. The energy regulator doing their job has just written to every energy retailer in the country saying, we're aware that a lot of you are offering HelpPay to your customers. Just make sure you're not foregoing your hardship obligations, because there are particular rules that energy retailers must follow if they find a customer can't pay their bill. This has had an interesting two-pronged approach for us. One is it sent some chills down our paying customers in energy retail because, frankly, no one wants to attract the of their regulator who can give big fines.
Yep.
And some have discussed with us about pulling contracts because they don't want to now innovate with us, despite being some of our first mover advantage greatest supporters. The regulators looking at you, we'll just walk away. When in fact, what the regulator has actually said, and this is the other positive side, there's been some negative impacts of the regulator doing this. On the positive side, we've had many approaches from all these retailers we've never spoken to saying, what's this new payment option that the regulator says we can offer? And the letter from the regulator actually said, HelpPay is a valid payment method. We encourage you to offer it as a payment option. Just don't forego your hardship obligations. So our initial response at seeing this letter was, oh dear, this isn't good. But then we realised, oh no, this is great. The regulator is educating the market about us and saying we're okay. But unfortunately, my comment about mid-level management is some mid-level management look at it and see it as, this is just a hassle I don't need. Why should we work with you? It's just easier to walk away instead of taking risk. Well, it's not even risk. Instead of being innovative, instead of activating a platform. And why should you not use your tribe of people around you to help pay for a service that you've already, as a self-responsible person, have incurred a debt with? So, yeah, it's an interesting situation to be in, but we're very confident that the fact that the market is talking about us in this way will eventually lead to more market exposure.
Yep.
But it's also somewhat frustrating just that you do something truly innovative and Australia in such a regulated environment. I mean, there's a reason why a lot of people refer to Australia as the nanny state. We are a heavily governed organisation and people are afraid to push boundaries. And that's where I see Australians need to change their mentality. Startups need to keep pushing. The productivity of Australia, and the ABS regards productivity as, for all the inputs that go into the economy, how much outputs come out, we're at the all-time low since 1983. We are not producing as much for the inputs that are going in. And that doesn't surprise me when we're so heavily regulated. Companies not taking risks, companies not pushing the boundaries, and that's what I guess we're here as startup founders, Matt, yourself included, to do.
And they need fuel. And, it's interesting, your comments on the United States, like that is the largest pool of venture capital on the planet. And, entrepreneurs need that, but we just can't replicate that in Australia. Like we're going to need a different approach.
I think it's an evolving approach. I'm not sure it's has to be totally different. The fact is that compared to 10 years ago, the VC industry and angel investing has come a long way. There's a lot more understanding, regardless of the economic environment, a lot more understanding, a lot more sophistication of thinking relative to a decade ago. And going into the future, why? Because, what is it, 7 or 8 out of 10 are failures, but 2 or 3 can be very good. And with good people, good funds and so on, you can be well ahead of the market on the average. Okay, not all the time. So, and people are getting more wealthy. There's so-called family offices springing up everywhere, and these people are looking for alternative investments in addition to the share market and property, standard conventional share market practice. So, it's a sophistication market, but it's a critical mass. It's there's nothing like critical mass of Silicon Valley or maybe Israel in the security space. To pull good people from around the world to get 1 + 1 = 3, to get that energy such that the ideas spring up around the coffee urn down to local cafe in Palo Alto, or Sandhurst Road, a little while back, Sandhurst Road, which is in the American terminology, 1 mile strip of offices, it represented 60% of the world's venture capital funding. It's just amazing. 1 mile strip in America on the west coast of America, Palo Alto. So the energy and the activity and the vibe of an environment like that, very, very compelling. Okay, so having it in Sydney or Melbourne, do you have that? No. But it's a lot better than it was even 5 years ago.
Indeed.
And that's good. And, such that do we need to go to, for example, Silicon Valley, whatever? Do young people need to go? Not so much now. And again, the globalization of the internet communication system, Zoom, the Zoom and the Teams and so on, really has been launched as a result of COVID. And that's a game changer instead of having to get on a jet. I was commuting to San Francisco, for God's sake, every 3 weeks. It's crazy when you look back on it. When we're doing our thing over there. And now you don't have to do that. A very good friend of ours, I'm chairman also of the Sport Australia Hall of Fame, which, the legends of sport in this country are members of the Hall of Fame. It's a fantastic environment. And one of our new advisory board members is a chair of one of the world's largest companies in US. And she only spends 1 week a month now in California.
Amazing.
And she can run the show as chair, So you wouldn't be able to do that 5 years ago before COVID.
No, that's right.
So that's a real plus, all of those things. That's good. So innovative, interesting, dynamic people in this country can actually, do stuff in this country. Don't have to go, over to California or whatever. That's good. It's good for this country. And from my perspective, you back youth every time. I see it within the world of sport. The people who get to the very top, it's quite very interesting. One of the things, and I use this word dickhead, and I really mean it, the very top of their craft in sport, the world champions, the Olympic gold medalists and so on, are not dickheads. Why? They're humble people. Again, why are these top people globally, no matter what sport, pretty much 99% of the case from my experience, because you need the help of a lot of other people. Okay? You need to naturally attract the help of other people, of mentors and of coaches and physios and so on. And if you're hard to work with, these people, good people, don't want to work with you. You won't get the support. So invariably, when you stand on the world stage, you've just become the best in the world at something in the world of sport. There's definitely a dedicated group of people, a tribe, including families, the support system, which is fundamentally important for that he or she to have achieved what they have. I've just retired as president of Swimming Australia, the Olympic program. Our Olympic squad that we're sending to Paris, the quality of these young people, it's fantastic. And it's true that each of these young people, male and female, have wonderfully dedicated people behind them. Okay, and the same, in my opinion, from my experiences in any of this stuff, whether it's in sport or business, in this cutting edge of giving it a go, the world of startups, where you got to leap, leap or swim, make that decision. You need good people around you. On the average, no question, much more on the average. It's not rocket science, this thing.
How did you tell the story and inspire the team around you to pursue the America's Cup Challenge? That was, you're talking about support that required capital, physical effort from talented people.
Yep.
All of these. I imagine that there were hard times. I imagine it was probably times when it was hard not to be a dickhead. You might have had the instinct to want to be, but how did you get through all of that and achieve that?
It's the creative vision that's exciting. Visions. I'm not sure the vision's the right word, but it is. It's a descriptive word. People don't want to work in an environment that's not exciting. Okay, because there's a lot of options for people to spend time. So again, the vision, and the same with the Swimming Australia. I competed already in 2 Olympic Games with the America's Cup that was successful. Let me just say also, I'd been involved in 3 losing America's Cup challenges over 14 years. Okay, so we're now talking about the school of hard knocks. This stuff is not easy come, easy go. This is the real world. Blood on the water, being blown away by the Americans every time. Come in spinner, right? And just hail fellow, well met, bid you farewell, maybe or maybe not, we'll see you next time. So having looked at the Olympics and had the last Olympics I competed in was the Canadian Olympics, I won the bronze medal. Very, very proud of that. Extremely proud. We had no coaching, no money, no nothing. It's a long time ago, before the Australian Institute of Sport was set up by the federal government. So there's no support system at all. And there was only 3 Olympic medals won, a silver and 2 bronze, and my bronze was one of the 3 medals in total. So that was it for the entire team.
Wow.
Okay, so people forget that. But if 3 or 4 months after I won the bronze, it became clear to me that I could have won the Olympic gold medal just as easily. I had the skills to do it if I had been mentally tougher. Okay, and it became clear to me that we needed to. And when you look at any 4-year period of the Olympic movement, having been involved in the Olympics, you have an improvement in performance in everything, every discipline. Throwing a javelin, 100-meter sprint. And I've talked to Andrew a lot about this stuff. In the stuff, over the horizon thinking is what we're talking about. You take any 4-year period, you get an improvement in performance. The interesting thing is, history, looking back over the last 140 years of the modern Olympiades, any 20-year period of the Olympic movement, you have a quantum leap in performance in everything. All the world records and Olympic records are blown away over a 20-year period. So the question is not why is it so, it just is so that in 20 years' time, the Paris Olympics that we'll see, and as it turns out, 1 month's time from this when we're broadcasting now, in 20 years' time, it will make today look archaic. The world records, the swimming, racing sailboats will be much further progressed. That's human endeavour. That's the beautiful thing about this incredible supercomputer that we have hanging between our ears. The creativity of mankind, I'm in awe of it. And I always will be to the day I die. So what we said with our America's Cup, and indeed with Swimming Australia, is what will the game look like in 20 years' time? Let's get there faster than anyone else in the world, okay? Such that even with the worst luck, we'll still be successful, okay? That's a pretty simple concept for people to get their mind around. So it is what it is. Like the way we're doing this podcast now, in 20 years' time, it'll be much further progressed. It'll be much further sophisticated. Look what's happened over the last 12 months in your industry.
Of course.
You know, and crowdfunding, where you'll be as an industry in 10 years, let alone 20 years, like the mind boggles. Okay. So we just said let's get out of our cocoon. This is what we think is world best practice at the moment, let's say in the Olympic Games or the America's Cup. And let's start freeing up our people, taking our blinkers off, empowering our young people to think outside the box and to start thinking about how we can play the game, how it could be played in 20 years' time, and pull that into what we think, how we could apply that today. And even if we get 5% of the game, would look like in 20 years' time, we'll destroy the opposition. So the opposition, in fact, is not in our case, the Americans or whatever. It was our ability or our inability to take our blinkers off. So that was the vision. And that's pretty powerful for young people who have no fear, because young people generally haven't failed. It's a beautiful thing. When you failed, it's got experience, and that can hold you back or can actually be a great asset depending on the type of person you are. But for young people, it's a very, very compelling thought. Okay, this is the game, but let's get on with it. You know, this is exciting. And the other aspect is, and, you know, we've talked about it a lot, is trust, you know, a value proposition of trust. And trust comes from integrity and honesty and transparency of communication. What you say is what you do, no bullshit, okay? And indeed, respect for each other, male and female, okay? And indeed, having fun, diversity and having fun. We've got to have fun. Us Aussies, we've got to have fun. If you're involved with something, again, 7x24, and you can't laugh with each other, don't have a common platform of humour, then it's a struggle, because life is, you know, whatever, you know that. So it's kind of interesting in that regard. So when you talk about, you know, kind of philosophic background, a vision that's exciting, and no matter what it is, you try and figure that out, very important too. And indeed a value proposition that's really powerful, and that's revolved around this very simple word called trust. Trust in an organisation, so that you know you've got your back. So we see this in, you know, we're broadcasting here from Melbourne. You've got AFL footy. I'm pretty close to the Collingwood Footy Club. Craig McRae, he's changed the game. He has changed the game of football. And people have been benchmarking off him, and it's basically respect for young people, and it's having their back, okay? And he talks about love. Now, having a grown man talk about love in the macho world of football is a new world. And he has no problem about that. And he says his number one priority is not the football team, it's his family, his wife and his children, followed by the team. It's pretty interesting stuff, you know. So, and we're learning all the time from all these high-performance people. And the world is changing, you know, again, in 20 years' time, it's these conversations. You know, the whole concept of psychology, making the right decisions at the right time in the world is what we talk about it, we call it sports psychology, but the psychology of being able to make the right decisions at the right time. This is a journey. We spent time with the special forces, the military, commandos and SAS, how they make the right decisions at the right time. We benchmarked that for the swimming program. Again, you know, the world of startups and venture capital, making the right decisions, ascertaining the quality of the people. Are they stayers or not? Are they going to be hanging there? Are they flexible enough to know when to, hey, doesn't feel right? The power of intuition is a journey in its own right. The sense of intuition is extremely powerful. Maybe, you know, people maybe discount it. Not true. If you are a student of this particular subject, whatever it is, and it's literally you are a life student, then this concept of you can't really necessarily put numbers to it, but it doesn't feel right. We need to go left or we need to go right, but we're not going forward. Let's reinvent ourselves. All of those things, it's interesting. And these are all journeys. And the area of high performance, and startups are high performance. The areas of high performance, you're dealing with very, very interesting, you know, successful people who can actually not be successful all the time, but get off the ground when they're, when it's so-called failure. These quality people, they are learning faster than other people.
Mm.
It's this, not so much the 80-20 rule, it's the 95-5% rule. 5% really are people you back. It's a question of finding those people.
Mm.
It's an interesting story of human endeavour in many ways. I'm not sure that that's answering any question, Matt, but it doesn't matter.
No, it's fascinating stuff. And I've heard you talk in the past about a sixth sense, being able to, and you've touched on it a little bit in your response just before, and being able to anticipate things before they happen. And this might be a personal question for both of you. If like spirituality plays a role in either of your lives personally and your approach to business, and maybe I'll start with you.
Well, I wasn't expecting that question, Matt, but I'm so pleased you asked it, and it builds perfectly upon what John just said. Some of what John just said, and I've spent many hours with John, was a little bit new for me. And what that is, short answer is yes, spirituality and soulfulness plays a massive part in business for me now. And let me go back in my career 15 years ago when I founded a technology agency. Jack Welch, CEO of General Electric, had a book called Winning. And it was a very famous business book about winning at all costs, cut the lowest performing 25% of your staff every year. And it was an 80s, I think it was written in the 80s, maybe 90s, mentality. It wasn't about collaboration, lifting people up, loving those around you. And I must admit, I used to swear by that book. Be candid, be direct, be somewhat ruthless. And I'm pleased to say as you have to be a student for life, as John also just alluded to, constantly learning, reevaluating. And the new approach, I guess, that I've taken to business with, and I'm probably blessed to be able to have my noble cause now, take those successes and those wins from a previous, role and career, and now apply it to something that is trying to better humanity. And you have to go into something like that with more heart, more compassion, more love. You're not doing it only to make money, which is the fundamental purpose of any corporation, is to return profits to shareholders. That's why corporates exist. But fortunately, in the world of ESG and CSR, corporate social responsibility, environmental sustainability and governance investing, corporates do have more of a heart. And fortunately, in small business and startups, we can have as big as heart as we want. And having compassion, understanding, love for those you're working with is something I love that Craig McRae example. I hadn't used it before. I know John's a massive Collingwood fan. Go Hawks this weekend though. That's amazing to hear that, because, and in that macho world, and I can say here in front of whoever's listening, yes, we need to have more compassion, understanding, respect, honesty, trust, joy in business and working relationships. And I'm probably, again, blessed to be in this social impact world, and we are genuinely trying to triangulate good between companies, customers, helpers, build tribes, build networks around people and give them technology to do things differently. So not only are we building a value proposition and a product that is somewhat spiritual, also myself, my co-founders, we're bringing a level of spirituality to business. And you hear about the psychology of sport, and obviously John's very much in that world, and the humbleness of leading tennis players, leading sportsmen. I thought that was a beautiful story, because they need great people around them. And they are so humble, these sports leaders, and I've been fortunate enough to meet some through John. And I think increasingly business is going that way as well, and certainly I'm trying to bring more of that. And I would summarise my own ethos is what's most important in life for you is not what you do, it's how you go about doing it. That is what's primary. It doesn't matter if you're a great sportsman who's the chair of these wonderful corporation, sports hall of fames and things, CEO of Birchal, the guy recording this podcast, the cleaner of this building. It doesn't matter what you do. It's how you do it, the quality of energy you bring to every given moment. Every moment that you live, what is the energy? How are you affecting those around you? You can go into a coffee shop, as I have many times, and be short and brief and not smile and treat the barista as just somebody who's serving you. Or you could learn from that barista and make their day, and they can teach you something by going with a smile and being open with an energy that is giving and loving. So that's my answer to spirituality. Yes, I think it's got a huge part to play in business.
Love belongs. It does belong. It's spirituality. Is that important to you?
The way I interpret that is really the standard that you live. Doing being able to live with yourself. And doing the right thing by people, having respect for people. The values that I mentioned before. About trust, endeavouring to, and that could verge on naivety as well, being too trustworthy. But building an organisation, if we talk about that, then that's part and parcel of high performance. There's no question about it. It revolves around deep level of trust, such that you get 1 + 1 = 3. People collaborating with each other.
Yep.
Ed De Bono, the man who coined lateral thinking. He became a good friend. He, in fact, used the America's Cup as one of his case studies years ago. And interesting fellow, of course. Dick Pratt, Vizzy, he was on his board of advisors globally, was Ed De Bono.
Wow.
Typical of Dick. Now, Dick was never asked to be a director of any company. He told me that. Dick was a mentor of mine who used to go around the tan quite a lot, okay? No one ever asked him. Why? Possibly they were afraid of what he could say. I don't know, speculation. It's fascinating, isn't it? You're talking about, Andrew, you touched on the sense of mediocrity. It's too much of a high risk to have someone like an entrepreneur, such a successful, hard-edged, amazing individual. When I say hard-edged with respect, but amazing individual, what he did. And then Anthony's taken it over to build into the US, for example. And Dick, I got to know him because he was the chair of the one of the other America's Cup projects in '83. But De Bono, he talked about the 4 areas, the 4 pillars of learning: reading, writing, arithmetic, and thinking. And the concept of thinking, not taught in schools, but it's so fundamental. Cross-pollination, going off into all different directions, and the sense of lateral thinking. De Bono was amazing in that regard. So anyway, if you talk about a philosophy of living, then, the sense of curiosity, but generally values which are right and proper. And so if you relate that, sheet that back to spirituality, then I understand that. It's being a so-called good person, and who you affect around you. Here, in the old world, they talk about you're only here for 70, not very long. It's 70 years old, for God's sake. Well, that game has changed, with medicine, technology. Where we'll be in 20 years' time, who knows? But the point is that, all of these things, it's one of these, life's not a dress rehearsal. It's a matter of, and doing the right thing and feeling good about your family, friends, your relationships with people. And that reflects in terms of how you live, how you conduct yourself in business and whatever.
Gentlemen, thank you very much for an amazingly inspiring conversation. I'm really grateful to have spent time with you both, and I really look forward to the future for Help Pay and seeing all the people that you can help and the business that you can create. And thank you for being a Birchal customer, and thank you both for joining me on the Birchal podcast.
Excellent.
Thanks, Matt, and thanks for bringing the Birchal platform to Australia so that we can all make a bigger difference. So thanks for having us.